Hey friends, Patrick here, and it is on. Blazor with .NET 8 is here. We've got static server-side rendering, we've got Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, all that stuff. And in this tutorial here, we will cover all CRUD operations, but only with static server-side rendering. So Blazor SSR, and of course, I will create other videos covering server and WebAssembly. And I actually already created another video with the release candidate 2 of .NET 8 and Blazor, and there we cover pretty much all the render modes, but it's a bit different now, so maybe you want to check out this video as well. So only static server-side rendering, SSR, meaning no interactivity actually, but we've got these beautiful new forms with this beautiful new attribute. And if you want to know more, just keep watching, and then you know how to build all CRUD operations with Blazor in .NET 8 without WebSockets, without WebAssembly. Awesome stuff. I'd say we dive right in, but first, maybe you also want to hit the like button. That would be great if you learned something, so please guys, hit it. And maybe you even want to subscribe to my channel. It does help really to create all these videos. So thank you very much for considering. And already thank you to all my patrons for supporting me. Link in the video description. Thank you so much. I love every single one of you. And now let's start with the tutorial. All right, let's just create a new project real quick. And this will be a Blazor web app now with .NET 8 and Visual Studio 2022. We call this maybe Blazor CRUD SSR. All right, for static server-side rendering. We hit next, and now this is important. Of course, .NET 8, we have no authentication type here. HTTPS is great, but this thing is important. We want to use SSR, so only static server-side rendering, no WebSockets. This would be Blazor Server, no WebAssembly, which would be Blazor WebAssembly, of course, and also no auto mode where we, well, change the interactivity type when the user reloads the page, for instance. So this is what we want to use. None, no interactive render mode. So it doesn't really matter if we have per page component or global. We include sample pages, so we get the weather forecast, because with that we can, well, we can use it to copy and paste a little bit maybe. And do not use top level statements. We leave this unchecked. So let's create this thing. And what I want to do is build a real simple video game library. There it is. Real quick, the .NET Web Academy is only open for a few more hours. So if you want to check it out, link is in the video description. We cover pretty much everything you need to land a job or get a promotion maybe as a .NET Web developer, meaning all the backend stuff with web APIs, Entity Framework, SQL Server, frontend with Blazor, of course, and then also deploying all that stuff with GitHub Actions and Azure, and designing, if you're into that stuff, with Tailwind CSS. So if you're interested, please guys, check out the link in the video description. And now let's continue with the tutorial. Let's close this, and for that little video game library, well, we need a class, right? We have already here our weather forecast class inside the weather razor page, as you can see down here. So no models folder, no entities folder whatsoever, but let's just do that. So I create a new folder called models, for instance, and in here now right click, add a new item, and this shall be the video game. And in here, not a lot. First thing is the ID, then maybe as a nullable string the title of the game. Next thing would be the publisher, and already the last thing I want to see is as nullable integer the release. Yeah, all right. And additionally, I want to use Entity Framework here to store our data persistently in the database, and actually use SQL Server for that, SQL Server Express. So totally free. You can download SQL Server Express and maybe SQL Server Management Studio to use it and see your database then. So let's save the model first, and after that some boilerplate code for the database stuff, for Entity Framework. So for that, I create another folder, and this would be then the data folder. And as you can see here already, we have no other projects here in the solution, meaning if you're coming from a Blazor WebAssembly world until .NET 8, maybe you are used to the ASP.NET Core hosted architecture with the server project, the client project, and the shared project. And then you would see the model, for instance, in the shared project, and this data folder here, all the database stuff then in the server project, and then only the components, pages, layouts, and so on. And the folder structure was also different, but then this stuff in the client, right? But now this is different. I made a couple of videos actually about that architecture already, just so you know. Again, if you're new to that, everything here, everything you see here is on the server, all right? So when we use then a component here, for instance, and we want to grab data from the database, we can directly use the data context then of Entity Framework. And of course, we will see that in a couple of minutes. So here now we add a new item. This would be the data context we inherit from the DB context, and with the help of the quick fix menu with control and period, we just find and install the latest version of Entity Framework Core. We can double check, and here then you see version 8.0.0. Isn't that nice? So now next step is the constructor. So CTOR, we hit tab, and in here now we need the DB context options of type data context. Call this options, and we also use the base constructor here. And then we need a database set. So this thing then will show our data in a table. This is a property of type DB set, and then a video game. And usually you would just pluralize the name of the class here for the table name. So in our case, that would be video games. And one more thing, I want to already seed the data, and we can do that with the onModel creating method. So protect it and then override, and this shall be the onModel creating. That's the one. Great. And in here now I just want to add, let's say 3 games, for instance. So this would then be model builder entity, and for the video game entity we say has data, and in here now we just add a couple of video games. So new video game, ID is 1, title, for instance, Cyberpunk 2077, publisher would be CD Projekt, release year is 2020. Now we copy that, IDs 2 and 3, Elden Ring from Software, and this was released in 2022. All right, and let's just say for the third one, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time by Nintendo, of course, and this was released 1998. All right, that should be it. And now we have to actually add NuGet packages first. We could, well, already start here in the program CS file to add the DB context to register our data context, but we want to use SQL Server as a provider, so let's add a NuGet package first. Right click the project, manage NuGet packages, and here now when you enter SQL Server you will find Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. So we install this thing, accept, and then also when we enter tools we will find Microsoft Entity Framework Core tools for our migration, code first migrations. This is what we want to do here, and with that we should be good to go. So back to our program CS, and now down here, for instance, builder services, not add razor pages. This would be add DB context, data context. Yep, that's the one. And now here we can give this thing some options. So options, and then options use SQL Server. And then we need a connection string. And this, well, maybe we can add this to the app settings JSON file. But first we well, give this thing already the place to look for. So configuration, get connection string, and then let's just say we name this default connection. All right, and one more parenthesis is missing, and this should be it. So builder services, add DB context, says it here, registers the given context as a service, our data context, with the option to use the SQL Server as database provider. And now last step, I hope, if I did not forget anything, connection strings, and here now the default connection. And if you also use SQL Server Express, then this should look like that. First we have the server, and then we can name this localhost / SQL Express. For the database, we say video game DB, for instance. Then we set trusted connection to true, and also trust server certificate also to true. This, by the way, is necessary since Entity Framework 7, now we have 8. Trust server certificate it is. All right, this should be it, and now we can start our migrations. So let's see, this is our project file. Now everything should be saved. We can go to the package manager console. We are currently here, all right, and if you use the tools or the tools of the NuGet package that we installed, then you can start right away here in this folder. If you want to use the .NET EF tools, well, the command, the CLI in essence, then you would have to go one step further in the actual Blazor CRUD SSR folder. Just a side note, so here now this would mean add migration, and for the first migration, let's just call this initial. And when this is hopefully successful, then we will see a new folder generated for us. Yep, build succeeded. This is nice. And now hopefully it will create. Yes, and there's our migration now. Here, the migration folder. This is what I wanted to tell you. And in the initial file, and already opened this file. I love that. This is new and I'm still not used to it, that it opens the migration file after adding this migration. So now in the up method, we have two methods here, right? The up method and the down method. And in the up method, we see that the video games table will be created. That's pretty much it already, with an ID, auto incrementing the identity, the ID field, title, publisher, release year, great stuff. And we see our data here, right? The migration or the seed data that we get with that migration. And in the down method, we see when we want to roll back that migration, that it just drops the video games table. All right, so now I would say I want that. And we call now update database. Yes, even if we have no database yet, it's still called update database. You see the commands here. And yeah, I think this is correct. Yeah, here it's inserting our seed data, creating the table, and so on. And now we can open up Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. We open the databases, and here we see Video Game DB. Time tracker is from the .NET Web Academy, so you can ignore this. But Video Game DB, this is the important one here for this tutorial. And as you can see, we have our video games table there with, well, our seeded data. Isn't that nice? So this is all the boilerplate stuff. With that, we can work with that, right? And now the next thing is Blazor SSR. For that, I want to create a new page where we first just get an overview of all the video games. All right, so here now, add a new Razor component, and let's call this video game overview, and this is a page. So we add the directive page, and the URL for that is games. And with that already, what we can do, of course, is we can have a look at the layouts folder and the nav menu here. And we'll just add another nav link. For instance, use this href now and also call this games. But regarding the icon, let's remove this. And then real quick, we go to the Bootstrap icons, which we can, of course, use here. If I enter game, I have this controller icon here, and we get the SVG here as well. So I can copy this, close that maybe, and then, well, this is not correct. But what I can now do is simply add the SVG here, save that, and let's run that already. And let's just see if this already works. There we are. We have the beautiful new icon here with our games entry. And when I go here, I come to video game overview. And when I open the console, put it here, and then go to the console really, and maybe refresh this. Then we see there's no information about any WebSocket connection or WebAssembly files downloaded, right? So exactly what we want here. Now let's just keep on implementing the video game overview. Maybe the title can be a bit different. So H3 video games, same thing for the page title, maybe simply video games. So now we should have another title, not localhost and so on. Let's just save that, restart. And now we have video games. That's nice. Weather and now video games. All right, this is what we need. And the next step now is really our table to display the video games. For that, I want to start here in the code block. All right, so the first thing I want to add is the list of video games. And by the way, if you already know Blazor, in particular Blazor server, in this situation now, actually nothing is different at all, or not much at least. So we just need the video games here. We will use the lifecycle method on initialized async to call a method, or in our case, well, definitely not best practice in my opinion, but we will just access the data context directly and get the video games then from there and display them here. The interesting part will then be the interactivity. But first, again, one step after another, let's get the games. And here we have no using directive or no reference, but let's just move that to the imports file, Blazor CRUD SSR models. So now we should know the video game type. These are our video games. And this is simply a new list of video games. All right. As I already said, after fixing this typo, we want to use the onInitialized async method. So protected, overrides, and then onInitialized async. This is one of the lifecycle methods. Maybe you've already seen here. We've got also onParameter set and on after render. These are the important ones, and on initialized async, as the name maybe already implies, this thing will be called when this component here is initialized. So on initialization, when this thing is here, we want to grab our video games, and for that we need the data context. Now, how do we get it? Well, we just inject it with the help of dependency injection. So add inject data context, and we call this thing now context. And again, well, first we need the reference here. Let's again add this to the imports file. Again, for this tutorial, this is okay, in my opinion, but usually I would recommend creating another service, right? So you would probably add a service folder or even another project where you put your services, interfaces, stuff like that, and or repositories, and then these repositories would then access the actual data context, because accessing the data context directly here, well, again, there are better ways just in terms of maintainability, for instance, also readability sometimes, and of course coupling, right? Loose coupling. So please, for your applications you want to use in production, maybe think this through and implement it a bit differently. So again, data context, still the error here, maybe Visual Studio does not know yet that I added it to the imports file. Let's just see. And now with that, we access our contexts with video games. There they are. And we can now say to list and maybe also async. And for that, we need another reference here. So let's add again this thing to the imports file. And now hopefully the errors will disappear after a couple of hours. I don't know. All right, now let's just say Visual Studio will figure this out, and you want to display our data in, yeah, there. It figured it out, nice. We want to display our video games now in a table. And first, when the count of the video games is 0, then we will display a loading text. And if it's not 0, if it's greater than 0, then we will display a table similar to our weather forecast here, right? So here they checked it for the forecasts. If it is null in this case, then it says loading. Otherwise, we see this table here, and we will do something similar. And here they simulated the delay, and I can already tell you here that stream rendering is one of the magic words here for static server-side rendering. All right, one of the magic words. What I mean by that is that we will see if you won't use stream rendering, and loading all video games now would take a couple of seconds, even if it only takes half a second, then the user will notice that, because the page would be displayed after this half second. And this should be different, right? When the user clicks on the button, then we should see the page, and then maybe after half a second we can see the data. And this is what we will do. All right, so first, if the video games count is 0, then we say, again, I just am inspired by the weather forecast example page here. So loading video games. All right, and here now the table, a plain old HTML table. Regarding the class, yeah, we can also use the table class. This is Bootstrap. In the end, for the header t-head, we say we want to use, well, first the title, then the publisher, and then the release. First maybe the header, right? And then the release year. All right, and for the body now, we, well, again, do it similar here to the weather forecast. We use for each, and for each game in our video games list or collection, we say new line, and then first the game title, not games, just game. So game title. And again, let me just copy this. And here now, and this shall be the publisher. And here, simply the release year. All right, this should be it. So let's just again restart our application. And there we are. Seen that? Let's just try that one more time. We go to games, and it just works. This is great. But now, stream rendering. So again, let's just simulate that. So let's just say it would take half a second or a complete second to load the video games. All right, so let's say here 1 second to do that. And when we now go and restart this thing, then we see directly the games of the list, but when I now click here, it takes 1 second until it opens that page. Again, I go to home and I click now, and it takes a second to see that stuff. And the magic word now again is similar to the weather forecast, stream rendering. So here now what we can do is add attribute and then in brackets stream rendering, save that, restart the application, and now we should see, yeah, loading video games. This is nice, right? So now I can go to home, go to games, page is open directly, and then it loads asynchronously the video games and then just puts the new HTML in there, changes the DOM. Great stuff, and still without Blazor server or WebAssembly. This is amazing. So this is how it works with stream rendering. Now let's just remove this. And with that, we have our first CRUD operation. In essence, we read all the data. Now, what about the other ones? Well, the first one would be to read a single game and then be able to update it. Also create a new game or add a new game, and then of course deleting one. Well, first thing I want to do is get a single game maybe, and also creating one and updating one. In essence, everything will be done with one more page, and that would be then the edit video game page, for instance. But my idea here now is that we will just add a button, or a link rather, that will navigate us to another page when we click on this thing. And if we here then use one game that is already available, then of course we want to update this thing or edit this thing. And additionally, we will add a link to add a new game, but still use the same page. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and there we are. And first create that new page. So right click pages, add, and then a new eraser component. And let me just call this edit video game. Right, there we are. And this thing now gets two URLs actually. So the first one would be simply edit dash game, and the second one is edit game and then with an ID. And now when we only use this URL, the ID will be null, because I will also add a parameter that can be a nullable int, or that will be a nullable int. And if we use this route, then of course we get the ID, and then depending on the state of this ID, so do we have one or is it null, then we know that the user either wants to update a game, edit a game, or create a new one, because with an ID which is null, we know that the user actually wants to create a new game. All right, so this is the idea behind all that. And what we can also do is still or already change the title based on that state of the ID. So first, if the ID is null, then we say our page title is add a new video game, and also use that as a header. So h3, and else we say edit, and then what I want to do is we will have another parameter, not a parameter, another property, and that would be the current game. And from that thing we want the title for our page title and also for the header. All right, so the first things we need now is the ID as a property, which by default is null, and we have to set this or add this parameter attribute because of that route here. All right, so this then works. And the other thing would be our video game property, so a video game and then current game, and this by default is a new game. And now another lifecycle method to get this thing. For that, now we need or we use on parameter set async. So meaning after the parameters are set, this thing here, we want to get the current game. So protected, overrides, and again on parameters set async. And here now we ask first if the ID is not null, then we try to get the game. So this is another CRUD operation here. We get the single game with context, not injected yet, video games, find async ID, of course again, inject data context, now we know the context. And again, here now we ask if the game is not null, we set the properties here. So current game title is only if this thing is null, then we set this to the game title and remove this operator here. This is what we have to do here using static server-side rendering, all right? Otherwise, binding the values in a minute will not work, at least for updating, all right? So please keep that in mind. It makes sense to use this operator here, game publisher, and current game release year is game release year. All right, so again, why are we doing it that way? So first, if we, for instance, add a new game, then we initialize that thing, all right? So we can use it then in an edit form here that we will add in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, if you already have a game that we want to edit, then we will also have an empty current game, let's say, but the title, publisher, and release year will be null. And with that operator, we will first check if it is null, and only if it is null, then we will set this title here. Otherwise, we would not do that. And this is how you're doing it with static server-side rendering. Otherwise, again, when you want to update something, it will not work. But for now, for us, interesting for us is only actually the title here, the set title, and well, the ID. So do we see that the user wants to create a new game or add a new game, or is it updating, editing an existing game? So this is the page so far, but to open this page, well, again, of course, we have to change this thing here. So regarding the edit, I would like to add a button, or now it would be a link to get to that page we just created with the ID of the game. So here we just add another column, and now here we say A, and the href now is edit dash game, and then add game ID, and we simply call this edit. That's it. All right. And regarding adding a new game, a href, and then edit game, and here add video game. All right, let's try that real quick. We are here in our video games list, and we see the links, right? So edit with ID 1, 2, and 3. We can go here and we see the title. Isn't that great? So now we can edit Elden Ring, Cyberpunk, and The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and also we can add a video game. So here now, no ID, and we see the title, add a new video game, and also the page title works. Great. So this works now, and the next thing would be really creating and updating. For that, we need an edit form, and here are important things to, well, pay attention to, because it is a bit different to your typical edit form when you used Blazor Server or Blazor WebAssembly. but let's just do it one step after another again. So first, the edit form. We still need a model for that. This would be our current game. All right. And then also we have a method for submitting the data. So on, there's still valid submit, invalid submit whatsoever. Let's just not cover data validation here. We just want to say well, submit everything the user enters. So now here that would be handle submit. And now, of course, the method's not there yet, but we will add it in a sec. Now the important thing is we have to give this form a name. Again, this is just for SSR, all right? So here now, form name game form, for instance. Let's add the handle submit method real quick. So here, async task handle submit. All right, so far not doing anything. But again, form name is important. And the other thing that we need to specify is that the model here, our current game, needs another attribute. So, or needs an attribute, not another. Here's another attribute, the parameter. But here now, what we have to add is supply parameter from form. All right, this is crucial. Okay, and what you can also do is, if you have several forms on one page, then you have to specify the form name of this property here, or for which form the property then is there. You know what I mean, right? So you have several forms here with several different names. Same name's not possible. Well, you can still do it with another component, but I think this is not important here. So just use another name. And then with that, well, if you only have one form, then we know that this model here is for that form. But again, if you have different forms, then you would have to specify the form in this attribute. That's why we use the form name. Okay, again, only necessary in Blazor static server-side rendering. Now let's implement this form here. We have a div with a label for the title. Call this a title. It's called label. And then here we use still the built-in component, the input text with the ID title now. And we can still use bind value, current game, and then the title. And we add the class form control. Again, bootstrap stuff. You can close this. And now add two more. So the first thing, or the next thing, would be the publisher. So here and here and also here, of course. But now this thing, let's just use a number field, and that would be then the release year, and same thing here. Okay, form control, still the same class. And of course, important, the button. So now we have the button type submit, and regarding the class, again, typical bootstrap stuff, button primary, and just call that save. All right, and now what do we want to do? Maybe creating first. So here we add another method, call this async task create a game. And now we just say context video games add, and then current game. Now important, as you can see here, this just begins tracking the given entity, right? It does not really store the game persistently in the database. For that, what we have to do is we call await context. Lots of typos today, it's late, sorry about that. Save changes async, and I want to give a little bit of feedback to the user. So what I want to do is I store the result in this variable here. So the result, as you can see here, it returns a task that represents the asynchronous save operation. The task result contains the number or state entries written to the database. So I hope that, well, one entry will be written to the database with that. Now, if the result then is exactly 1, I want to store this in a string variable and then display this status here. And for that, again, private string status, which is a string, an empty string by default, and let's just display that here. This is our status. And now again, here I just say status is game added successfully, else status is something went wrong. All right, and now let's use this method, of course, in our handle submit method. So here again, we check if the ID is not null, then we call the update method. But in our case now, we call await create game. So let's test that now. Restart the application. This is our result. We can now go to add a video game. For instance, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, publisher again, CD project. The year was 2015. We hit save and we see game added successfully. Isn't that nice? All right, so now we can go back and here is The Witcher 3. And this is creating a game. So now updating is the next step actually. So for that, we create another method, async task update game. And here now, first, again, we try to get the current game by its ID. All right, so var db game for database game, await context video games, and then find async ID. And if we have it, so if db game is not null, then we say or we override every property. All right, so db game, then title is current game title, db game publisher is current game publisher, and db game release year is the current game release year. And in the end, we say await context save changes async. We don't have to call an update method here in the context or of the context. All right, so just we already updated it in essence by setting the properties here. And again, let's just copy this stuff, and here we can say game updated successfully or something went wrong. And now here we can call our update game method. All right, again, let's test that real quick. All right, and now we go here to edit. Let's say we change the title, save, game updated successfully. We can go back here, title is changed. Great, so this works as well. Nice. And now the last step is actually deleting a game. We have, well, a couple of options here. Of course, we could now again go here in the form, add a delete button here, or we add a delete button here in our table. And another option would be to not use a button at all. We can again use a link, but that's, well, a bit creative maybe, a link that then navigates the user to a page, and in that page then we have the ID as a parameter, and then on initialized, for instance, then delete the game and then navigate back to the overview here. Well, I think this is not, well, it is an option, but maybe not the best option. So what I would like to do is simply add another button here, and again, this time it's really a button. so that we can delete the game here in the table. But the thing is that a button by itself will not work with static server-side rendering. For that, we would need interactivity. So the trick here is to actually use a form, but this time this will not be an edit form. This time we will use the plain old HTML form, but let me just show you how this works. So again, we need another column here first, like that, and then of course here as well. And now again, we need a form. So an HTML form with the post method. And then here also we give this thing a form name. So form name. In our case, or you already learned it, right? The form name can't be the same if you have several forms on this page. And in our case, then we will have as many forms as we have games in our table. So the name should be a bit different. So what I want to do here, and this is now great syntax, is I say delete game form and then game ID, like that, and close this again. All right, so this is our form name. Now we also need a method for submitting this form. So add on submit. Again, we need an ID here. So lambda expression it is delete game with the game ID. Of course, the method will be added in a sec. This is our form. And in here now we add a button, and I would like to use the link style. It's not perfect, but this is not a design class. And another thing we need is an anti-forgery token. So anti, right? Forgery token. So to prevent CSRF, cross-site request forgery. This means that we make sure that this request really comes from our page and not from anywhere else. All right. Okay, and now the delete method, this thing can look like that. So async task, delete game int ID. And here now we say again, db game is await context video games, find async ID, and then if the db game is not null, we say context remove the db game, await context, save changes async, and then I want to refresh the page, and for that we need the navigation manager. So add inject navigation manager, and here now I say navigation manager navigate to, and then the same page, so simply games, and that's it. Okay, so let's restart the application again. There you see it, right? It is the link style, but well, we do not see the URL on the bottom left, and the height is not the same. So of course this is definitely something we can fix, but anyways, I can now delete the witcher, and you see it's reloading the whole page in essence, and we see the result. So witcher is now deleted, and in essence we're done. But there's still one more thing I want to show you, and this is the enhanced navigation, or at least one part of enhanced navigation, because when I put this down here, for instance, and I go to save, then I'm jumping back to the top. I'm using the scroll position, and this is not what I want. But there's an easy fix now thanks to Blazor and .NET 8 and SSR. So we can just go to edit video game and just add this little bird here, enhance, and yeah, if enabled, form submission is performed without fully reloading the page. This is equivalent to adding data enhance to the form. Well, we could also do that in or on the other page. And this flag is only relevant in server-side rendering SSR scenarios. For interactive rendering, the flag has no effect since there is no full page reload on submit anyway. Okay, so to get more of a SPA, a single page application feeling, this is really a great feature. And when we now reload and again click save, when we scroll position is not changed, something went wrong because we haven't changed anything. So now when I do that, the result will be different. Save, game updated successfully. Isn't it great? So now we do not lose our scroll position. Now when we go back to the games page and now I delete this, this of course won't work because I'm actually doing manually a reload. So how can I fix this? Well, maybe instead of using the navigation manager here in the video game overview, I just say again, video games is this thing here. So we reload the games. Let's see how this works out. So we restart the application. And now here's Elden Ring, for instance. Let me just scroll further down, hit delete. We lose the scroll position. All right. But now let me add this game again. So Elden Ring from software 2022. It was, we save, game added successfully, back to games. There it is. And now I go here, edit, no, video game overview is correct. And here now again, in this case, it's data enhance. All right. Restart the application. I scroll down. Let me scroll a bit further down so I really see the difference. I hit delete. Scroll position is still the same. All right. So this just a little bonus with the enhanced navigation now. This is how it works. And this is how you implement all the CRUD operations with Blazor in .NET 8 and static server-side rendering, or in short SSR. I hope you learned something, guys. In case you did, please don't forget to hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel and check out the other videos here on the screen, because I'm doing the same stuff for Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly now with Blazor in .NET 8. Interesting stuff, lots of possibilities here. So I hope I see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.